Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Sunbury Motors, North 4th Street in Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf.
Let's bring in the outstanding Frank Bodani. Frank, always a pleasure, my friend. Great to have you back.
Hey, good afternoon, Steve. Hope you're doing well midweek here.
I'm doing very well. How about you?
You know, it's a little busy time here. There's a few things going on with Penn State football. Just a couple here. We head toward Thanksgiving, you know.
So what have been your thoughts about how the last 72 hours plus and how it's played out here and what the future can look like? So we'll start with how it's played out to this point.
Well, I think the timing of Mike Yurcich's firing and that announcement and such, I think maybe caught some people a little by surprise, just the timing of it, but not the occurrence of it. I think that seemed to be trending toward a move. And, hey, I mean, the offense did not look, at least from the outside, the way fans, media types and such expected, did not do that. So what's going to change? Something's got to change. And I think it's interesting that now we have, at least officially, you know, unofficially, we have a coordinator search going on as the season's going on. So it's a lot because there's also a game Saturday, right, of course, that, you know, you can't, you're not forgetting about. But I think Penn State fans are just more, you know, I mean, they know that Penn State plays Rutgers on Saturday, but I think it's more about, well, where do we go from here? Because what they saw on offense is not what they wanted, what they expected, and not enough to beat the two teams they really cared about, fair or not. So it seems like the focus is a little more on that than it is on the Rutgers Scarlet Knights coming up.
All right. So when you look at the state of that offense, quarterback, running backs, offensive line, tight ends, wide receivers, how do you look at each grouping to this point based just on what you've either seen on TV or when you've physically been there to watch it? What is your general impression of each of those areas?
Well, running backs, I just think there's more to get from them. And I wonder about being utilized, how they could be utilized, because Nick Singleton and Katron Allen both at least appear to be vastly, you know, have vast talents among them. I mean, we saw Nick Singleton run away from people, very explosive last year. You've seen Katron Allen with his vision, with his power, and it just seemed like there's more to get there. So how do you get Nick Singleton in space? How do you make those great athletic gifts real weapons? It just seemed like they were not able to do that. So give them all the credit for how hard those two kids are trying, but I think it's the usage there. I think there's more to gain. I really thought they'd both be more involved in the pass game this year, and getting somehow Nick in space and on the edge. The tight ends, I mean, really productive. I mean, I guess I'm always someone that thinks, hey, you got 6'5" guys who can really catch the ball. Why are you not throwing it to them even more? I think they really got to try to find that group more the last couple games of the season, because I think they're so good at what they can do, especially catching. You know, blocking, I think it's hard to replace Brenton Strange. I think that's a reality.
Agreed.
I think he did a tremendous job, and I think he maybe overexceeded his expectations as a blocker last year, but I think they missed him this year. But pass catching wise, the tight ends to me is, you know, everything, the red zone, everything you would want. I mean, wide receivers, that's the biggest question on the entire team, Steve, to me. That's the biggest fault of the entire team. Do they have a number one guy? I mean, I don't know. Keandre Lambert-Smith, great athletic ability. I don't know if he's quite what the number ones were in the past, and they don't have the guys behind him, and to me, their biggest priority going forward next season, development, transfer portal, whatever you want to say, to me, that's number one on the team. Offensive line, I think, has done well enough. Have they dominated the way some people thought maybe in the run game at times? No. But overall, I mean, the guy, Caden Wallace, has stepped up. I mean, I think we can see that. I think they've held their own. I think they've held their own. And Drew Allar is the quarterbacks. Drew is number-wise, I think he's, a tremendously coachable kid, has done everything they seemingly have asked. Two biggest games, I think he needs more help. And I wonder what it's going to look like in the pass plays coming up Saturday, for example. Are we going to see a real difference in the routes, the schemes, trying to make what James said, make it easier for Drew early in the games with easier passes? So I'll be fascinated to see how that looks any differently.
Where do you think Drew Allar is maybe better than he was when he started the season? We'll keep it on that vein, because I mean everybody will take, okay, he's not doing this, and this. Where do you think he's better right now?
Well, I think he's come into terms with the idea of running with the football. I mean, and making that decision to do it. I didn't know if that would be a part of his game. I didn't know if it would need to be a part of his game. But he is 6'4", 6'5". I mean, he kind of looks like Ben Roethlisberger. I mean, he's a load to bring down, and I think there's things to gain from that, right?
Right.
So, I mean, to me, that's and him maybe dealing. Okay, so I didn't know if he'd have to deal with a lot of adversity from the position. So I think we've seen him do that. The way he's entertained the media, the questions, some of the tough times on the team, I think he's handled that. I think he's handled that pretty well.
Yeah. Okay, so defensively, when you look at this team defensively, what are the elements that you like about it that puts the team in a position to win consistently?
Well, I mean, speed, depth. You have arguably the most talent of any Penn State defense, just to start with, under James Franklin. We went through this the beginning of the year. I mean, there's 3-4 All-American candidates on that team, on that defense, and the speed that they have, the depth that they have, and the guy calling the plays and coaching them up. I mean, is there one better in the country than Manny Diaz? I think he's as good as they get.
Yep.
So that combination, I mean, and it's all layers, right? I mean, I think in other Penn State defenses has been so good at linebacker, so good on the line. I think, it's that the talent and everything I talked about is spread out on 3 layers better than it's ever been.
Right. Okay, so we talked about moving forward from here. The choice of an offensive coordinator, how interested are you going to be in the style of coordinator it is, based on the fact that you do have 2 quarterbacks here that do have nuanced differences, but some differences as to how they play the game?
Absolutely, and I think James made it a point on Monday to talk about how they're going to be involved. I mean, Drew Allar is your number one guy, right? 5-star quarterback. He has all the NFL, at least it looks like all the NFL abilities and tangibles. And to me, you search for this type of guy, to me. You finally got this type of guy. So I think you have to make a choice on somebody that's got to be able to come in and coach that type of guy. You know what, coaches in this day and age, players, what is the loyalty really anywhere? I mean, they can go somewhere and they can change the next month, the next year. So you got to get to me, you have to be able to, if you have a treasure there, some gold, you got to be able to develop it and mine it like now. So to me, I think somebody has to be able to develop a pro-style quarterback. It's going to be a rough choice to me if all of a sudden the pick is somebody that hasn't been able to prove that in their career, right? Somebody that's completely, maybe just all spread and look at what quarterbacks they've worked with. I mean, I think you need someone have been able to develop a guy like Drew Allar, because that's the kind of guy that to me that's the kind of guy that can win you a championship. So I am. I mean, nothing against anybody else that's on that roster. Love Bo Prabula and the other guys they got coming in and Jackson, but I think you have to be able to develop a big pro-style quarterback.
All right, so now let's get to this part. There will be those who are vocal about how they feel about a coaching staff when things don't go right on the field in a particular weekend. And normally that call is to fire everybody. Head coach, coordinators, janitor, everybody. Okay. All right. And I've done research on this, and what I've found is, and I want to know what you think about this. You look at some of the big name programs. USC's been searching. Texas has been searching. Right? I mean, Miami's been searching. To a point, Florida State's been searching. They've all been trying to search, and Texas A&M's been searching, been running through people. Auburn's been searching. Right? When you look at James Franklin, right, and the progress that's at least been made to get to this point based on where he took over, what should the perspective be, in your opinion, about that and what I just talked about?
Well, there's two different ways of, you almost have to sit somebody down and say, okay, there's two different ways of looking at this. I understand the fan, your way. You have a certain expectation based on previous, what they've done and what you think they should do. And then you have the reality of the rest of the college football world. And, LeVar Arrington had a nice little video piece today, and trying to put things in perspective. 10-2 and beating, he had not lost to anyone else on their schedule other than Ohio State and Michigan. So that's the flip side. That kind of consistency is pretty much unbelievable, right? Because James gets looked over and glassy-eyed when he talks about consistency. But, I mean, to beat everybody else every week, I think it is harder to do, obviously, than what people realize, right? I mean, that's an accomplishment. And that's pretty much, that's been the case. That's not just this year. I mean, that's been the case for several years here. So can they look at the bigger picture? I think it's simply that. Can they look at the bigger picture? Do they care about the bigger picture? The bigger picture meaning what his overall success has been in rebuilding, not just winning, but in rebuilding Penn State.
Right.
And in this day and age when everything is so much more volatile with your coaching staff and your players. And I see here, Steve, here's the other part that I think is hard for people to understand is the financial NIL part of it. And I think it's hard for all of us to understand, because I don't think the figures are, they're not laid out there for you as to what is coming and what goes and what you need. But we know Penn State was behind in that.
Yes.
And that's not necessarily James Franklin's fault. So you do need money nowadays to be able to put together talent on a team. And that's something I think people still do not want to grasp. And I think Penn State is working toward that. And I think with the success that James has had, that plays into this. But if you don't, but then at the end, I think people just want a win or two over those teams. Really.
Of course, absolutely.
I think that's what it really comes down to. If they would have, how would the narrative be for fans if they won one of those games this year and that's it? Nothing else has changed in the last 2 years. But
you are right. Yep.
How much different would you think it'd be?
Yeah, it would be dramatically different, right? And we'd be having a different conversation right now, even with a split. Yeah,
it's one game. And maybe he's You know, and I'm not there. You know, I don't know what the disconnect may be between James Franklin and the staff and Mike Yurcich and the plan being created and the plan being executed. But if that could be one of the main things holding them back in those two games for whatever reasons, and if you're going to fix it, you fix it now. Try to. And if they come out next year with whoever they have leading, and then they win one of those games and take care of their business, going to be a different scenario. I mean, it's a tough world we live in when it comes to judging, isn't it?
No, it's very tough, without question. And the dynamics change dramatically next year, Frank, because next year means that Washington, Oregon, USC, and UCLA are in. It's a 1 through 18. The top two get in, but even if you're not in the top two, you could be 3 or 4 because the college football playoff expands to 12. What can that do, pro and con, to the perception of any coach?
Yeah, it's harder and easier, right? Because, I mean, now Penn State has an easier chance of qualifying, but their schedule's a little tougher. I mean, in some ways.
Yep.
But here's the thing. I think it's not going to be as tough of a change for them as others, right? Because they are one of the few who already had to play Ohio State and Michigan every year, right? They already know what it's like to do that. So now suddenly they're going to have to play those Pac-12 teams, but they're not going to have to at least play Ohio State and Michigan every year the same year. So I don't think it gets dramatically tougher for them as it does for others because they've already known that, right? So I think when this all shakes out, I think it's going to be better for Penn State because I think simply the fact they've proven that they can make an expanded playoff. They've proven that since 2016. They could have done it several times. And I don't think even with the Pac-12 teams coming in that's going to change.
All right. Frank, always a pleasure. Great perspective as always. Look forward to seeing you on Saturday.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve. All the best till then. Enjoy it.
Frank Bodani, York Daily Record.